John Branca is co-executor of Michael Jackson's estate. The estate's already grossed more than every other celebrity estate combined. Howard Weissman is the attorney for the estate. And John Branca and Howard Weissman join me now. Let me start with you, John. You very rarely give television interviews. What is your primary motivation in going public now?
Well, Piers, Michael is no longer with us, obviously, and we felt that we have a message to get out to talk about the Circa Mortal show and various other questions that we felt would be good to address at this time.
You knew Michael for well on 30 years, an extraordinarily long relationship with him. How would you describe the nature of your relationship over that time? It was a bit roller coaster, wasn't it? You sort of dipped in and out of his business life.
Well, we started in January of 1980, and I'll never forget the first meeting. Michael had his sunglasses on, and in the middle of the interview, he leaned over and he said, "Branca, do I know you?" I said, I don't think so, Michael. I think this is the first time we've met. And he said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Michael, I think I would remember." So we went for about a decade, and then on and off for pretty close to 3 decades. I was his principal business advisor throughout much of that period, and we had developed a friendship as well.
I interviewed him once, a fascinating experience, and I've discussed this on the show a few times, but you're the most interesting guy to talk to about that, because I found when I talked to him about charity work or children or whatever it may be, he had a very soft, gentle, high-pitched voice. When I talked to him about anything to do with business, it seemed to drop a couple of octaves, and he became much more serious and, dare I say it, adult in the way he spoke. Did you find that with him?
Absolutely. Michael was multifaceted. He was misunderstood in some ways, but we think that the movie This Is It gave fans a pretty good glimpse at the real Michael. He was a perfectionist, and at the same time he was a humanitarian who respected the work of his fellow artists.
A good businessman, would you say?
Yeah, Michael had great instincts, particularly with regard to marketing and promotion. He was always connected with his fans, and he's had a loyal fan base to this day.
You had this extraordinary experience with him on Thriller, when most videos at the time were going for about $50,000 to make them. And Michael had this ever more fanciful plan, which meant the cost of making a Thriller video was going to be $1 million. And he came to you and said, "Right, Branca, make this work." And you had the brilliant idea of going off and pitching the making of the Thriller video as a TV show in its own right and a video, and you sold that for $1.2 million. So you ended up making Michael a profit. He must have thought you were a genius, didn't he?
Well, Michael was the genius, but the Thriller video was so good, it's been considered the greatest video of all time.
And the other really smart business move that Michael Jackson made, I know you were heavily involved in this, was the decision to get his hands on the Beatles catalogue. Tell me about that process.
Well, Michael was good friends with Paul McCartney, and after Thriller, Michael had a lot of money, a lot of cash. So Michael asked me to call Paul McCartney and Yoko Ono, his good friends. He did not want to bid against them. And I spoke with Yoko, and I said, "Yoko, are you bidding on this catalog?" And she said, "No, we'd be thrilled if Michael could get it rather than some big corporation." I spoke to Paul McCartney's lawyer, who said they were not bidding. So we went out. It took us a year to close that deal. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of competition. But Michael was passionate. He wanted to invest in things that he was passionate about. So we did buy the Beatles catalog. We later bought some Elvis Presley copyrights. And that publishing company now forms the cornerstone for his net worth.
And in terms of the Beatles music, is that still part of Michael's estate?
Absolutely.
And in terms of the sheer number crunching here, could you tell me now what he paid for it and what it might now be worth?
Well, we bought the catalog in 1985. We spent $47.5 million, which is well known. We sold off a background music library, so his net investment was about $41 million. And while I can't give out confidential details, it's been reported that Sony ATV is worth upwards of $2 billion, and Michael owns half.
Wow. So he took it from 40-odd million to $1 billion.
Yes, and I would say in addition to Sony ATV, Michael has his own publishing company, which is called MyJack, which owns all of his own songs as well as many other songs we bought over the years. So when you add the two companies together, it's even more valuable.
So all this stuff about Michael being $500 million in debt when he died is a load of baloney, isn't it? Presumably the publishing rights alone, by the sound of it, were worth several $billion.
Well, Piers, I'd like to comment on the speculation about Michael's debt. Net worth, you know, one doesn't want to have to sell those assets. So, you know, those are cornerstone assets that we plan on keeping for Michael's children and keeping those in the family.
What kind of decisions have you taken which have turned out to be very smart ones in relation to handling his estate?
Well, my co-executor, John McClane, and I mean, let's face it, Piers, we're fortunate to represent Michael Jackson, which makes our job an easy one in some senses. But I think the first thing we did is we made a decision to greenlight This Is It, the motion picture. And I will say at the time we were criticized. People, you know, some family members said Michael wouldn't want these rehearsal tapes out there. But John and I felt that you really saw Michael as a great artist and a great humanitarian. That was our first big decision. And it went on to become the biggest documentary and the biggest concert film of all time. And I think we converted even new followers for Michael.
When I interviewed Jermaine Jackson recently, he said that there were lots of outtakes from that film, which if people saw those, they would be concerned about Michael's fragility, his fragile condition. What would you say to that?
I'm not sure if that's true or not. Kenny Ortega, who is a great director, went through all of the footage to assemble it together. And, you know, I think with any artist, they have their great days and they have off days. That's the nature of rehearsal. So I have not seen all the outtakes, but I'm pretty confident that what you see on the screen represented the true Michael.
I mean, you were so close to him that at one stage, when you got married for the first time, Michael Caine was best man. He brought Bubbles the chimp, who wore a tuxedo. Little Richard was the minister. I mean, hard to imagine anyone being as close to him as you were at the time. He brought you back into his business life shortly before he died, didn't he? Was that to run the concert stage of things? I know you weren't working for AEG, but explain that relationship.
Well, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned that first wedding, because I have fond memories of Michael being the best man. And Bubbles in the tuxedo, it was priceless. It was priceless. In terms of coming back into Michael's life, we separated amicably in 2006. And I got a call from Michael's manager, Frank DeLeo, about a month before we met. And Michael was excited and Frank was excited about the tour. And they wanted me to give some thought about some ideas of what we could do around the tour. Frank DeLeo and I met several times, and then finally I met again with Michael about a week before he passed away. We met at the Forum where he was rehearsing. And I'm so glad that we got that chance to see each other again.
And how did he seem to you?
It wasn't a long meeting. You know, I was there for perhaps an hour, and Michael seemed fine. He seemed... You know, there were different Michaels. I've seen Michael at times where he's been very introverted and very quiet, and other times where he's very extroverted. I think that night he was really preparing for the show. He was leaving for England soon, so it was hard to draw any conclusions from that meeting.
I want to take a short break, John. When we come back, I want to talk to you and Howard about the moment you heard that Michael had died and the problems that you've had in running this extraordinarily complex estate. And I'm back now with John Branca, co-executive of Michael Jackson's estate, and Howard Weissman, Jackson's attorney. Howard, let me just bring you in here. Obviously, fascinating conversation there with John. People didn't really understand, I don't think, just what a business empire Michael Jackson had amassed by the end. In all your experience of working in the entertainment industry, how did How did Michael's business empire rank?
Michael truly was one of a kind. There are very few legitimate icons in the entertainment business. A lot of people try to get to that level or are looked at in different ways, but Michael was really one of a kind. He had the ability to generate millions and millions of fans worldwide that converted to huge numbers, and we see that, unfortunately, post-death as well as when he was alive.
Yeah,
he was an extraordinary individual.
Is it right to say, I don't want to be morbid about this, but is it right to say that there's an old sort of joke about this, that when entertainers die, that it's often their best career move because billions and billions of their records get sold and so on. But there is a certain truth to that, isn't there? That if you look at Elvis or John Lennon and Freddie Mercury and so on, that their death can spark huge, huge sums of money coming into the estate.
Yeah, I think that's true. The catalog sales spiked for a while. What differentiates Michael from others, in my opinion, the This Is It record, or the This Is It film, for example, the This Is It CD, now the Cirque shows, he was able to create additional businesses well beyond the music, and that's unusual.
John, let me ask you, I mean, Michael was well known to be pretty profligate with his spending. How big a problem was that for him by then? I don't want you to get into the precise details of what debt he may or may not have had, but was his spending out of control, as people kept saying it was?
Well, that was an area that was handled by Michael's business managers and accountants. And Michael made a lot of money, and I probably believe it's true that he spent a lot of money. But he left a lot behind. He had a lot to show for it.
I mean, you worked on the Elvis estate briefly, I know that.
Yes.
How does this compare? The two great entertainers, solo artists, how do their estates compare in terms of how you manage them?
Well, it's hard to compare. Elvis came up in a different era in the 50s. I was a big Elvis fan. It's one of the reasons I got in the music industry. But Michael, you know, went to the Berry Gordy Motown School of the music business and then learned from great teachers. And one of the things I found representing various members of the Hall of Fame